Okay, and now I will go ahead and pass it back to you. Okay.
Great. Can you see the Library Partnership Initiative slide?
No.
Okay. Then I will. How about now?
Yes. And the recorder thing's in the middle of my screen. You might want to just close the little X.
I don't have anything on my screen.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Okay. Wonderful. Then I'll begin. So as Julie mentioned, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to jump in. I think, as Julie said, that makes for a much more interactive webinar, and understand that there might be questions that arise partway through and can't wait to the end. So I am Anna Sophie Harling. I'm the Vice President of Business Development here at NewsGuard. NewsGuard is based out of New York. I'm currently actually in Chicago before heading off to the State Library Conference in Bismarck, North Dakota. So I'm very involved with the Public Library Initiative and media literacy side of the company. So to begin with, NewsGuard is a company that uses journalism and journalists to try to provide users with the information they need to avoid false news and misinformation. And we research online news websites and help readers and library patrons know which ones are trying to do real journalism and which ones are deliberately trying to fool them through a variety of different means. So as you all know, over the last couple of years, this has become quite a hot topic. Trust in all news publisher has fallen, and big companies like Facebook and Twitter have themselves led rise to a big problem, which is that people are increasingly encountering websites that are looking to, or that seem to provide real news information, when in reality, they're often purveyors of false news or advertising or things that seem like they're real, but are actually there to spread hoaxes or conspiracy theories. So NewsGuard is based on the idea that human intelligence is a real viable alternative to artificial intelligence in this field, and that those online platforms like Facebook and Twitter, Google, etc., should not just be relying on their algorithms to solve this problem, but that there are people out there who have the information at hand and the intelligence to tackle this problem. So what we do is we provide credible and independent, unbiased ratings and reviews of online websites. And we not only provide what's called a red-green rating, but a nutrition label on all of these websites that account for 90% of online engagement in the US. And as mentioned, we're based in New York, so we're starting with the US, and by 2019, we hope to launch in Europe as well. We are a team of journalists from a wide variety of backgrounds and ages and interests and geographical spread. So Stephen Brill and Gordon Krovitz founded NewsGuard earlier this year. Steve has founded a variety of different companies centered around journalism and is himself a professor and journalist, and Gordon is the former publisher of the Wall Street Journal and also has extensive experience, and the two have worked together on a variety of journalism ventures. The rest of the team is made up of people starting from a couple of years out of college all the way to veteran journalists in their 60s and 70s who've worked at institutions like Reuters, the AP, the New York Times, C-SPAN, CBS, etc. So we really hope to have represented a really diverse range of backgrounds and opinions, but while maintaining across the board sort of journalistic quality. So again, our mission is to use journalism to fight fake news. I think this slide is sort of an overview of everything I've talked about, but I think the key part is this last paragraph, that we are truly the opposite of an algorithm and the opposite of censorship. So we're very transparent about how we make all of our decisions, and as I'm about to explain, in our nutrition labels, we explain how we reached all of the conclusions in our reviews, and we provide the names of every analyst and editor that worked on every label, and their history and background as well. And because we're journalists, when we review websites and we write anything negative about them, we make sure to reach out to get comment and to discuss with the website what they can do to improve their rating. So in that sense, we really hope to improve the media landscape, because oftentimes websites themselves don't know what they can do to be more credible or more transparent, or what it means to have a corrections policy, for example, or why it's important to include information about those that are writing content for the site. So we really understand and encourage that websites, quote unquote, game our system, because we want websites to be more motivated to get a higher rating and to reach the green that passes the minimum standard of credibility and transparency in NewsGuard's eyes. So here you can see represented one of the biggest challenges facing people in the 21st century, and something that I'm sure librarians grapple with as well, which is that when people encounter news and information on the internet, they often do so only in the form of a headline. And they see a URL, but they don't know what that means. And oftentimes they don't know how to begin learning about whether or not that online news source is credible. And if they're even asking themselves that question, that's already a good first step, because a lot of people don't even stop to think about or be suspicious of the news and information websites that they're encountering. So here you can see how NewsGuard works just in a feed. People who encounter a headline will see next to it a series of either red or green icons, and we also have an orange icon for platforms like Wikipedia and YouTube that basically warns readers that anyone can upload content onto that website. And we also have a purple icon for satire websites like The Onion. So here are our 9 criteria they're divided into credibility and transparency, and they're all weighted. So as you can see, and I can hear that some people might be taking screenshots. I just want to say that I will send out this entire presentation to all of you afterwards as well, including some more information as well, so that you have this on hand. The top criteria is not repeatedly publishing false content or information. This is the most heavily weighted criteria, as you can imagine, and we lean on the work done by a lot of very good fact-checking organizations around the country who are already putting in the work and finding out which websites are repeatedly publishing false content or making false claims. And we also do research ourselves on this and carefully explain this in the nutrition labels, how we would reach either a red or a green for this criteria. The next is gathering and presenting information responsibly. So in this, we look to see what sorts of other news sites a website might be getting its information from, whether or not they're relaying this information in an accurate manner, whether they rely on a wide variety of news websites, whether they're doing original reporting, whether or not they're doing firsthand interviews, whether they're linking to sources. So this is often an indicator of reliability, whether or not they're fabricating information, obviously, and who's writing it. So if these are journalists, if these are bloggers, if they're videographers. So that's really an important and wide-ranging criteria. Correcting and clarifying errors, we look to see if sites have a stated corrections policy or if they regularly publish corrections, and explain on our website as well why this is an important practice and what it means. The difference between news and opinion responsibly is quite an interesting criteria. We look to see if sites have a designated opinion section where they publish editorials or columns, or if they state in their mission statement if they have a specific aim or goal and whether or not they keep to that. So that's another one that we look at that's in the credibility rating. And avoiding deceptive headlines, I'm sure you can imagine. We look to see if headlines reflect accurately the content of the articles, and whether or not they claim or they have false or misleading statements or sensationalized information in the headline itself. And then the next four are all transparency criteria. So we look to see if sites disclose ownership and financing, how they label advertising or sponsored content, if they provide information, whether biographical or contact information about their content creators, and if they reveal who's in charge of the website, and whether those with a financial interest in the site have any possible conflicts of interest. And it's important to say here that not all green sites are rated equally, and not all red are equal as well. So a site might have a mix of red and green on the different criteria. And
So,
whether or not, I'm sorry?
oh, I'm sorry, Anna. There was a question, and I'm not sure if you can see it. It was back to the very first point, and the question is, how much false content does it take to hit repeatedly in the first rating?
That's a great question. We internally have discussions about some of the most egregious sites, or what we consider to be borderline sites. So you will have websites that that publish a majority of false content, and then you can quite easily tell that. For the borderline sites, the bigger question is how many false articles does it take to meet this minimum threshold? And I think the answer to that question is that we really take it by case basis. We tend to see what sorts of false claims they are and whether or not that site publishes corrections on those claims. So for example, a site that propagates the Pizzagate conspiracy, or conspiracy about shooters being false flag operations, and don't publish corrections on them, will come down on those sites much harder than a site that might make an error but will quickly publish a correction afterwards, or if called out on that error, will then publish a correction. So those two really do go hand in hand. But again, it really does depend on the website. If there's a follow-up, then I'll continue. So here's one case study, for example. This is a site that is made to look like the BuzzFeed News website, except it's spelled with a Z at the end of news. So this was created by a marketing team based out of New Delhi, and publishes some news content that it copies from other websites, but it also publishes a lot of news content made to look like real news, but that is actually advertising various products or holiday getaways in and around India. And it's not labeled as such, and it provides no information or false information about its content creators and how it makes its money. So here you can see that someone who's scrolling through their feed and might look at a URL recognizes vaguely that it says BuzzFeed News, but doesn't click through and might share an article, or believe at face value what that headline is saying, or what the article might even say. But someone with the NewsGuard extension would see that bright red icon and probably be quite curious as to why it received red and click through, and it would then see the full nutrition label. And this is what the nutrition labels look like. They're quite a big block of text. They range anywhere between 300 words to many more, depending on the weight of the site. So as you can imagine, CNN, Breitbart, and the New York Times all receive quite lengthy labels because there is a lot to discuss and review. And in each of these labels, you'll have different sections. So ownership and financing, content, credibility, transparency, and history. And at the bottom, you can see, if you were to scroll down, a list of sources. So we list the sources for each of the different sections, and people can click through and view them themselves. And here you can see that there's always a top line description, and then in each section, carefully explained how we reached the conclusions for each of the different criteria. So really, from a media literacy perspective, it's quite an invaluable tool that library patrons and students of all ages and media literacy backgrounds can use to understand the kinds of questions they should be asking when they're encountering and reviewing news and information on the internet, and what they should be looking out for. So I'll just let you take a look at that. And before we began writing the labels, we actually worked with the Gallup and the Knight Foundation on a joint study in which they used NewsGuard's red and green ratings and wanted to see how that worked in terms of trust and perceived accuracy for users. And luckily, they found that the red-green rating tool worked and that accuracy increased for news headlines that came from green sources, even when users typically had not trusted that source, and decreased for red sources, even if users had found that to be a credible source in the past, and that participants were less likely to read, like, or share stories from red sources. So these ratings are effective across the political spectrum, and NewsGuard has also found that its ratings are spread across the spectrum and don't skew to one side or the other. By this time, you're probably wondering, how do we make our money if we're not charging for the browser extension, which is free to all consumers and, of course, to all libraries and academic institutions? So on the one hand, we are in conversations with all of the big online companies, Facebook, Google, Twitter, etc., and actually have already signed a partnership agreement with our first partner, Microsoft, as part of its Defending Democracy project, through which they want to help empower readers with information on sources and the reliability of the news content in their feeds. And the other way that we make money is we work to provide advertising companies with real-time blacklists or whitelists of websites so that they can put their clients' advertisements on credible news organization websites and drive revenue away from so-called fake news sites that would be on the blacklist. So in that sense, we really do hope to help real credible journalistic outlets get more revenue while, again, driving the revenue away from those that are trying to publish false content, often just to garner clicks to get more money from ads. So this is where you come in. One of the reasons that we have been reaching out to libraries at the state level is because we want NewsGuard to be represented across the country. Our first official partnership was with Hawaii. The state librarian there, Stacey Aldrich, was one of the very first early supporters and was one of the people who pointed out NewsGuard's value from a media literacy perspective and really promoted its importance and potential value to public libraries as well as schools and academic institutions around the country. So we have an official partnership program whereby libraries, no matter what their size, can download the NewsGuard extension on the browsers that they make available to patrons, as well as distribute a single handout explaining how libraries and NewsGuard are working together to promote media literacy. Of course, a lot of local libraries have their own media literacy programs, and we help them incorporate NewsGuard into these programs and have a lot of literature and a guide for educators and a media literacy guide that we can provide as well if you're interested. Of course, we're also looking for libraries to help spread the word. If you think there's a library either in your state or in another state not on this webinar that you think could be interested in NewsGuard or could find NewsGuard valuable, please put us in touch. We're always happy to have more join. And then finally, we're very excited always to get feedback and reviews from librarians themselves and their patrons. And I'll just close by saying in a quick sum that we're an alternative to algorithms and to censorship. So rather than siding with the big platforms who are deciding to censor news organizations by blocking accounts altogether, we're very much on the library side, which is that if people want to read it, you should let them read, but you should also help to let them know who's behind what they're reading. So really, we're just an information provider in that sense. And because we call for comment and because we're quite transparent about what we do, we never tell people what to read or what not to read. We just give them the information, let them decide for themselves what they want to trust. And because I know this is important as well to a lot of libraries, we never collect any personal information about those who are using the extension, and we don't track browsing data or history. So that's quite an important one. And on a final note, one thing we always say is that NewsGuard is simply doing what libraries have been doing for hundreds of years, which is guiding people through vast collections of material and information so that they have a better idea of what they're reading. So at this point, here is my email address. It would be amazing if you could reach out and I can provide you with more information and materials on NewsGuard and sort of walk you through the process of how one would go by downloading the extension. We're on Chrome, Microsoft Edge, Firefox, and I think very newly as well, Safari. And please let me know if you have any questions as well.
Hi, Anna. This is Julie, and I would appreciate a copy of the media literacy guide that you guys have, and I'm happy to send out the one-page handout to everyone that's on this webinar, so you don't have to worry about doing that. And or
course,
if you would like them to reach out to you, that's fine as well.
Sure. Yep. Either works. And we can figure it out as well after the call. We have two versions of the media literacy guide, sort of a shorter version and a longer version. I can send both, and then I can send the handout as well, and of course a copy of the presentation.
Okay, that would be great. And so there is one question. It says, I understand the need to balance for the first rating, but wonder if the criteria is too vague and might not cause an appearance of bias, even if you're careful about it. And I think that's going back to that repeatedly question.
One sec. I'm just going to take a quick look at the the question as it's typed out. Right. So on the NewsGuard website, we actually have a definition of each of the criteria. So for the first one, the definition of the first criteria is, in the last 3 years, the site has not produced multiple stories that have been found, either by journalists at NewsGuard or elsewhere, such as fact-checking organizations, to be clearly false and which have not been quickly and prominently corrected. So I think that might be slightly less vague. I think the reason that we decided, and early on we had actually said that there was a set number. So I said, in the last 3 years, there have not been, it might have been 4 or more stories. We ultimately felt that it really depended on the egregiousness of the claim as a whole, but also how it holistically fit in with the site as a whole, and the quality of the journalism being done otherwise. For example, the reason why it's really difficult to put a number on it is because some sites publish thousands of articles in a week. Some will publish 5 in a month. And so it really is difficult, and you have to sort of look at it from a perspective. But the way that we try to avoid appearing biased is by carefully laying out all of the claims that we feel are false or that have been flagged by fact-checking organizations, and so that in that way the user can themselves understand and decide whether or not they agree with NewsGuard's rating. So if you really love a site and NewsGuard is rated at red for that criteria, and you go on and you read the nutrition label and you understand what they've marked as false, but you ultimately disagree, you can still continue reading that website. It just means that that patron will have explored that question and will have sort of come to terms with whether or not they agree with NewsGuard. So I think in that sense, what we're really trying to do from a media literacy perspective is get people to start asking these questions that they might not have been asking otherwise, without telling them what to read and what not to read. Okay, and I just saw that you responded. Wonderful. Anyone else? Okay, great. So Julie, I'll just be in touch with you then and send you all of those materials.
Right, and if you want to go ahead and give me back the presenters, I will stop the recording. So we will be posting this recorded website to our archived webinars for librarians webpage, and I'm sure people who weren't able to make it today will be watching it at a later date. Okay.
Okay, wonderful. And again, definitely get in touch with me about joining the partnership. I look forward to hearing from all of you.
Okay, thank you so much, Anna.
Thank you so much. Have a great day, everyone.